I'm delighted to be back with you again today. I was here a few weeks ago, and I'll be with you one more time on August 20th. My name is Rich Weyls. I'm a priest of the Diocese of Olympia, former rector of St. Andrew's in Green Lake, now the manager of spiritual care for all 5 Providence Swedish hospitals. So, as I joked the last time, in another life, I'm Teresa's boss, who's not here today. Have you ever had a mountaintop experience? You know what I'm talking about. It's one of those experiences when you're just completely bowled over by the love of God, or you feel spiritually moved in some way. Often, this is also a deeply emotional experience. Maybe this has happened to you in church, possibly when you heard a really beautiful piece of music, or maybe something in a sermon just really hit you and just right where you were living at the moment. Or maybe it happened when your first child was born and you fell in love in a new way while marveling at this very vulnerable new life that you took a part in creating. Or maybe it happened when you gazed at a sunset while holding the hand of someone that knows you even better than you know yourself. Don't you just want to hang on to these experiences? But we know that we can't capture and possess them. They are fleeting and infrequent. In one of his many beautiful meditations, Franciscan priest and mystic Father Richard Rohr challenges this mountaintop religiosity. That is, a spirituality that divides the sacred and the special from the secular and the ordinary. He writes, "We have created an artificial divide or a dualism between the spiritual and the so-called non-spiritual." He goes on, "Dualism is precisely what Jesus came to reveal as a lie. The Incarnation proclaims that matter and spirit have never been separate. Jesus came to tell us that these two seemingly different worlds are, and always have been, one. They are part of the same whole." Now, I agree with Richard Rohr completely, but sometimes I struggle to live with that non-dual consciousness that he advocates. That is, I struggle to see God in the mundane, in the muck and the mess of my regular, unspectacular life. This has always been true for me, but it feels especially true in my work as a hospital chaplain. I encounter profound suffering and death every day. Distraught patients and families often ask me, "Where is God in all of this?" And I ask you, where can one find God in the isolation or the grief and the trauma that the world continues to endure? In what sense is this suffering and loss construed to be sacred? Well, I think we have an answer from Jesus today, and it's shockingly simple. Yes, Jesus is transfigured on a mountaintop, but then he comes down from the mountaintop. That's it. He comes down from that mountaintop experience. He returned to the valley of his regular life to continue his work, the ministry of love and compassion, announcing the good news of salvation even though it led him to Jerusalem, where he himself experienced profound suffering and death. But today in the gospel, we see Jesus in his unveiled glory. We see his divinity. We see the view from the mountaintop. All three synoptic gospels tell the story of the Transfiguration, and all three of them conclude the story with a passage we didn't hear today. It's a story about the healing of a demon-possessed boy who lived back down in the valley of real life. I find this pairing very instructive because it illustrates exactly what Richard Rohr is trying to argue. What happens in the ordinary trials and tribulations of human life is just as God-infused as the experiences that occur on faith's mountaintops. Unfortunately, though, we don't always believe this, do we? We fall into the habit of measuring the depth and success of our faith by the number of spectacular epiphanies that we can claim. Worse than that, sometimes we compare ourselves to others. Oh, that person's even holier because they have all of these profound spiritual experiences. That's a bad thing to do in the spiritual life. We hear people say things like, "Have you felt the Spirit in your Sunday worship? Has Jesus spoken to you? Have you seen a vision? Has God answered our prayers in the specific and concrete ways that we want God to answer our prayers?" You've heard this, haven't you? The danger of this God up on the mountaintop Christianity is that it prompts me to compartmentalize my life, as if God is somehow more present in a rousing choral anthem at church, or a stirring sermon, or a silent retreat at a seaside monastery, that God is more present then than when I'm with a crying patient, or I'm doing my laundry, or I'm picking up dog poo in my backyard, or sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic in Seattle. The problem in the Transfiguration story is that as soon as Peter experiences this spiritual high, he wants to hoard it and hold on to it. What I hear in his plan is to make dwellings is an understandable but a misguided attempt to contain, domesticate, protect, and possess the sublime, to harness the holy, to make the fleeting permanent, to keep Jesus shiny and beautiful and safe far away up on the mountaintop. After all, everything is so good up there, so clear, so bright, so unmistakably spiritual. Why don't we want to stay there forever? Well, friends, it's because Jesus actually lived our real, messy life, which means God is every bit as present, active, engaged, and glorious down in the valley as God is up on the mountaintop. In fact, what Peter eventually learns is that the compassionate heart of God is most powerfully revealed amidst the broken, the sinful, the suffering, and the despairing. Yes, Jesus was on the mountaintop, but these are the people Jesus went out of his way to be with. The kingdom of God shines most brightly against the backdrop of a parent who grieves, the child who cries, the disciples who try but fail to manufacture the holy. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. God's beauty is best contained in broken vessels like us. We might not like this aspect of faith, but it's an aspect that has an awful lot to teach us. To me, it's interesting and sobering to notice that the Transfiguration doesn't grant Jesus' disciples the faith or the strength to heal the suffering boy at the end of the mountaintop experience, nor do they have special skill to comfort the brokenhearted father. What they experience during their spiritual high doesn't magically translate into vibrant, transformative faith down below. Which is to say, if we are sitting around waiting for more mountaintop experiences to mature and deepen our faith before we get about loving and serving God's children in the valley, then I'm afraid we need to rethink our strategy immediately, because the discipline of the valley happens in the valley. We find the Jesus who reaches out and loves the brokenhearted in a place where the brokenhearted are. Finding God in the ordinary requires us dwelling in the ordinary. We learn holiness only by being present to our regular lives. There are no shortcuts. God is not in the business of offering us permanent real estate on the mountaintops. So, here is the great challenge of the Christian life. Can we speak glory to agony? Can we speak agony to glory? Can we hold the mountain and the valley as one, denying neither, but embracing them both? Can we do this hard work out of love and compassion for each other, so that no one of us is left to hurt and suffer in the places where God's presence is harder to discern? Now, I still yearn for mountaintop experiences. I've had a couple in my life, and that's okay. But they come and go according to God's timing, not due to my micromanagement. And in that sense, sublime spiritual experiences are easy. They require little from me. They just happen. I can't control them. What's hard is consenting to follow Jesus back down the mountain. What's essential is finding Jesus in the long road that transverses the valley of real life. It's finding Jesus in the deep sorrow, at the heart of the unanswered prayer. What's key is discerning the presence of God in the spaces between the light and the shadow. Now, we can't know ahead of time what mountains and valleys lie ahead for us. We can't predict how God will speak and in what guise Jesus might appear. But we can trust this. Whether on the brightest mountain or in the darkest valley, Jesus is there. Jesus abides. Even as he blazes with holy light, his hand remains warm as he holds yours. Even when everything else we're counting on disappears, Jesus remains among us. Jesus alone. So don't be afraid to come down the mountain. Keep looking and listening for the sacred, no matter where the journey takes you, because Jesus is present everywhere. Both the mountaintop and the valley belong to him. He is the Lord of all. Thanks be to God.